Welcome to Women in the News, a Georgia Windless production examining Georgia news events through the eyes and perspective of our endorsed winning women legislators and progressive allies. I'm Melita Easters, Georgia Windless Executive Director. We are all thrilled to wake up this morning with our Atlanta Braves as the new world champions. What a night it was watching election returns, looking at and crunching numbers for newly released Republican legislative maps, and watching the Braves win a 7-0 game. Georgia Windless is also celebrating last night's victory for former Savannah Mayor Edna Jackson in the House District 165 special election. She captured 53% of the vote in a race against 4 other candidates. She will travel to Atlanta as soon as results are certified to finish the term of her lifelong friend, the late Mickey Stevens. She is a former Windless board member, and Windless was proud to endorse her. She has long been a role model for younger women, and this victory builds on a long legacy of public service. At 10 a.m. today, House Speaker David Ralston and Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan convened the once-in-a-decade special session to draw new district lines for congressional and legislative maps during the coming decade. Joining us to review the maps and offer their expertise are Senate District 42, Senator Elena Parent, an attorney and champion for bipartisan redistricting commissions. SD 43, Senator Tonya Anderson, who serves as chair of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. HD 136, Rep. Carolyn Hugley, a member of the House since 1993, who has led House efforts to develop the proposed Democratic House map. And HD 137, Debbie Buckner, who represents a rural area outside Columbus where population has declined in comparison to the statewide growth rate. Because Republicans hold a trifecta of power, the governor's mansion and both House and Senate majorities, they have the votes to adopt maps without Democratic support. However, tradition dictates at least some effort to find compromise. Let's first have Representative Hugley, as the legislator with the longest legislative service on today's panel, outline the process from here for adopting maps and how many maps must be approved before adjournment.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Melita, for having us today. And it's my pleasure to be with each and every one of you. We are now in special session for redistricting. This is done after each census year, and it's required by the Constitution of Georgia and the United States. So our process in Georgia is that the responsibility is vested in the Georgia General Assembly. The General Assembly is going to meet between now and Thanksgiving, and we must redraw the lines for our congressional districts, for our state house districts, for our state senate districts, for any entity that has districts, the PSC. Then locally, you're going to see districts that are going to be redrawn for city council, county commission, school board districts. But while we're in special session, we're going to focus on the 3 top districts: congressional, state senate, state house. And why do we do this? We do this because each district should have an equal number of people so that one person, one vote would apply. And after the population changes are recorded by the census, then the legislature goes back and realigns those districts so that there will be the same number of people in your House district and the same number of people in each of the Senate districts and the same number of people in the congressional districts. So we've seen that Georgia has grown by over 1 million people, and those people have to be redistributed so that each of those districts have the same number. And so it's a very political process, but I'm so happy that Windless is involved and informing citizens because we need you to weigh in to tell us how you think this should go, because all of the political decisions that are going to be made over the course of the next 10 years will be affected by what we do here over the next few weeks.
Thank you so much. Now, this is a lightning round kind of question, but before we go any further, I want to ask each of our panelists what the currently proposed Republican maps are for their district. Do you still live in your district? How much of the boundaries for your district changed? And do you have any concerns? So let's begin with a quick answer from Representative Hugley.
Well, yes, I still live in my district. Of course, the number has changed. I live in 136 now, but to find me on the map, you would have to go to 141. The core of the district is pretty much the same, but there have been some changes on both sides. I am in the center of Columbus, so they shaved off a little here and shaved off a little there, but the core of the district remains the same.
Thank you so much. Representative Buckner, what about your district? Unmute.
It just muted.
Debbie, you're muted. Okay.
All right. Hopefully that works now. I apologize. I tried to unmute and I muted myself. Again, the core of the district is pretty much the same. I'm still in Columbus and still have two of the counties that I represented. One of the counties that I represented, Harris County, I'm no longer there. And I have a new county, Troup County, up around LaGrange. So the district became much longer, but it is still a good bit of rural Georgia right around the Columbus area, and still has some of Columbus in the district as well.
Thank you so much. Senator Anderson, what about your district?
I do still live in my district, it will be interesting to see if anything changes from the proposed maps. But I absolutely am looking forward to the dialogue. So I'm still in my district.
Great, thank you. Senator Parent, your district did not grow as rapidly as some in your area. How did you fare?
Well, thanks for the question, and thank you so much for doing this, and hello to everyone. It's just so wonderful to see all of the engagement out of Windless and other groups as we enter this process. We're really grateful to all of you, really needed. The district I reside in contrast to 10 years ago, I fared better. The core is still the same. I lost some precincts at the north and added some to the south, but the core of the 42nd remains the same.
Okay, thank you. Now, Senator Anderson, it was after 4 p.m. yesterday when Republicans finally released their proposed House map, and even hours later when the proposed Senate map was released. What does this tell us about the overall Republican mood for this entire reapportionment redistricting process?
Alita, that is a great question. And I have to tell you that these wonderful women on the panel with me kind of sort of warned me of this. But the mood is probably the same as it has been for the past few redistricting and reapportionment sessions. I'm hopeful that out of this, we will still have fair and transparent maps throughout this process. So I am hopeful.
Well, Representative Hugley, you were first elected in 1992. And so this is your third special session for redistricting. How do you compare the attitudes of Republican and Democratic caucuses this year to previous decades of special sessions? And do you expect more or less of a fight in the coming days?
Well, redistricting is always a fight because the majority party wants to maintain or strengthen the majority, and the party in the minority wants to make sure they don't get wiped off the map and still have opportunity. So that's always the case. And in Georgia, redistricting has oftentimes ended up in the courts. And I expect no less than this time. If we looked at what Republicans have done across the country, and I expect that they'll do the same thing here in Georgia, they've tried to strengthen their hand at the expense of growing minorities in those states that we've looked at. And that's what we see here in Georgia. Minority populations have grown significantly in this state. And if you look at the map, it appears that they've tried to spread those populations out in order to maintain their firm grip on the majority here in the Georgia House. So get ready. I know that everybody is concerned about what's going to go on. But the thing that's most different for me this year is that we have more citizen participation. People are paying attention, and I encourage citizens to impress upon their legislators to have an open and transparent process that listens to citizen input. And if we do that, then we'll have a more fair map.
Thank you. Before we get to our next question, I want to remind our viewers that if you have a question, a specific question about the redistricting process for our panelists, please put it in the chat box or as a comment beneath the Facebook live stream. Now, Representative Buckner, you, like several other win-list endorsed Democratic women, represent a rural district which has declined in population during the past decade. However, many members of the Republican power structure also represent rural districts with declining populations. From your perspective, how do these declining populations influence the maps each party has proposed, and perhaps why certain legislators choose to run for higher office?
Great question. We do see fewer people in the rural areas, and as a result of that, we have seen several people, as you said, that are seeking higher office. For example, Senator Tyler Harper is running for Agriculture Commissioner, which really helped out the people around him because his district was very short on residents. In the early information that I have, I think that there's probably about 9 pairings that will occur. They are not all in rural areas, but it's just because of pockets of population are not where they need to be for the current districts to remain as they have been in the past. Some of that has been helped by people running for higher office, like Labor Commissioner or Ag Commissioner or whatever, but the map drawers do have some challenges in certain parts of the state, and particularly the rural parts of the state, south and southeast and the southwest corners are really very much looking for people to make the districts whole. So there is a long-term rural Democrat Republican paired against each other in Southwest Georgia because there's just not enough people.
Thank you. Now, Senator Parent, in 2010, you flipped a House seat, one of the few flips in the nation that year, from red to blue. In 2012, Republicans exacted revenge. Could you share that story as a reminder to our viewers of just how brutal this redistricting process can become?
Sure. Thanks for the question. Yeah, so I'd gotten elected in 2010, really tough election fight, as you said, Melita, and then, did my first session and then promptly got drawn into a combined district with Representative Scott Holcomb, a good friend, former colleague for actually many years before we were elected at the same law firm. So needless to say, that was a blow to both of us. He was also newly elected. And the district was actually drawn to try to, for the Republicans to try to pick it up. It wasn't just a Democrat pairing in a Democratic district. It was drawn for them to make it competitive so they could try to claw it back. In the end, I didn't run. I had a job offer, and to be honest with you, and this is relevant for I think everyone and for our viewers, my 2010 race had taken a lot out of me. I had a baby in the middle of it. I hadn't been married that long. I campaigned for like 18 months and knocked on doors for 6 months. So it took a lot out of me to flip that seat. And of course, it was a huge team effort. I'm not trying to diminish the role that everyone else, including Winless, played in that. But the idea of kind of going through that tough of a race immediately again, since I knew they had their eyes on the district, was really stressful. And I just thought it wasn't maybe the right time. In retrospect, I think I walked away from it a little too quickly, but we all came out winners in the end. Representative Holcomb had a tough re-elect in 2012, but he held on. and defeated the Republican and has been in that seat since. And I only left the General Assembly for 2 years in the end, and then was elected to the Senate when Jason Carter ran for governor in 2014. But it's an example of them sort of going after certain people. I was more vulnerable than in this current district that I am in the Senate, because I'm surrounded by Democrats now. You see the worst gerrymandering on the edges of where they're trying to shore up districts to keep them for Republicans, not sort of in heavy Democratic strongholds in general. Right now in the Senate, we see serious gerrymandering in this current proposal in the 48th district, which Senator Michelle Au holds and was flipped by Zara Karenchak, just before that, both of whom are minority women. We see that they're trying to make her path to re-election very difficult and have divided up the AAPI community there. We see that the 17th, which has a strong and growing African-American population, has been wildly gerrymandered into a crescent shape to try to short it up for the decade and to save white Republican male Brian Strickland. So it's the same thing that I experienced in 2012. And, Senator Al is being amazing. She's such a tough cookie, but I talked to her and I said, look at me, 10 years ago, I got drawn in with one of my best friends, life and politics isn't any one election. Not at all saying that we're not keeping her, because we are, but it's worth remembering for all of us that sometimes we have to take the long view in politics.
Very true. And you mentioned Michelle Au, and I loved her response on social media. She posted a post about how her district had changed, and she said, "I'd be scared of me too," which I thought was
absolutely
perfect. Let's talk about congressional districts for a moment. We have both Democratic and Republican versions of congressional maps, which have been out for several weeks. Additionally, cartographers from various nonprofit groups have published suggested maps on social media sites. The Republican map creates more Republican than Democratic districts, while the Democratic map is more evenly balanced and has competitive districts. Could you review some of the specifics, Representative Hugley?
Well, I want to first say that the Democratic map was worked on very diligently, and it reflects the fact that the population of Georgia has changed, and it reflects that Georgia is becoming more of a 50-50 state. It is not so heavily majority Republican as it has been in the past, and the Democratic map reflects that. And the Princeton group gave that map a B. The map that was put out by the Senate Committee for Congress has an advantage for the Republicans. And the Princeton group gave that map a C, particularly as it relates to competitiveness. I think what we need to bear in mind is that we want to have a fair map for Congress, and we will know that we have a fair map when we get a map that produces districts that will give us at the ballot box the will of the people. The will of the people of the great state of Georgia is that we're more evenly divided than the 8-6 proposition that the Republicans are putting forth. And it is my hope that we will continue to move forward and get to more of a even proposition and creates a competitive district or two in there so that we can get to the real will of the people.
Thank you so much. Senator Anderson, the Republican map in particular makes re-election more difficult for Congresswoman Lucy McBath, who is Black. In past decades, this could create a problem for the map with a court challenge, but now not so much. Could you explain that just a minute?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm very disappointed in the fact that Congresswoman McBath has been, and any other Democrat, but specifically Congresswoman McBath has been put in this position. And I just want to pull out a few highlights to talk about Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which prohibits a state or political subdivision of a state from using any standard practice or procedure that results in a denial or abridgment of the right of any citizen of the United States to vote on account of race or color. That's number one. It also prevents vote dilution, the use of any electoral scheme, annexing neighbors with large concentrations of white residents into where people of color are the majority. And I feel like that it has happened to Congresswoman McBath. It prohibits moving from elected candidates by district to at large, placing elected officials with appointed, moving, closing, or consolidating polling locations, all of those things, and limiting access for people of color, adopting discriminatory redistricting plans that either pack, crack, or pack together or crack apart communities of color. And we know that this is something that's prohibited, and we're hoping that sooner rather than later, we can get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed so that we are not facing this 2 years, 10 years, or another 20 years from now, as it is very harmful for this clearance not to be a part of the Voting Rights Act, as it is necessary that we maintain majority districts or minority districts in a way that their representation, their vote is not diluted and their representation is not denied. Because if they are represented by someone who is in a majority and they're a minority, then they don't have to necessarily take on even having a conversation with them. So hopefully we can get this John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed, and we can be in a position that we consistently have a transparent process and fair maps.
Thank you. Senator Parent, you're the only attorney on today's panel. Could you explain the kinds of legal challenges we might see once all of these maps are approved, and kind of what has been the overall history for legal challenges to maps in the past? And what have Democrats and progressive groups been doing over the last few months to build a record for future court challenges?
It's a great question. And as Senator Anderson was saying, we do have a vastly changed legal landscape now during this redistricting process than we did 10 years ago, which includes the fact that the Supreme Court has struck down the pre-clearance formula. They didn't strike down the ability to pre-clear, they just said the formula was outdated. And as Senator Anderson was saying, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act does contain that new formula, and is hopefully will, if they, get their act together up there, will be passed into law, because, certainly we sorely need it. The other big change is that there was more fear of partisan gerrymandering 10 years ago, but in the Richo v. Common Cause decision, the Supreme Court declined to rein in partisan gerrymandering. Now, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act does still remain in effect, meaning that you can still sue. There's no preclearance after Shelby v. Holder, but you can still sue after the fact, and gerrymandering and redistricting based solely on racial identity and other groups, or packing or cracking minority communities does remain subject to challenge. And I certainly expect that we will see litigation around that around the country and here in Georgia once this process is concluded. There is also some precedent around coalition districts, and those would be districts where similarly situated groups are not 50% of the population in any one district, but sort of work in concert to elect a candidate of their choice. And, we see that in a lot of joining of Black, Latino, and Asian voters, sometimes white voters as well. So I think that we're going to see a lot of litigation around the concept of coalition districts. There's, as I said, some precedent about it, but I think that it may be fleshed out a lot more in the litigation that we'll see over the next 10 years. From the headlines I'm looking at from North Carolina, Texas, Wisconsin, there's sure to be litigation coming out of every battleground state. In Texas, like here, gained population. Texas actually, of course, gained congressional seats, and none of them have been drawn for the primarily Latino population that drove the growth in Texas over the past 10 years. So these will all be items that will be litigated over the next 10 years. And these cases, basically can take almost the full decade to wind their way through the federal courts.
Thank you. Let's circle now back around to the House maps, which cartographers and number crunchers spent most of last evening reviewing when they were not watching that Braves game. What are the most egregious concerns you two House members see with these maps, beginning with Representative Buckner?
Well, I think that a lot of people are going to be very concerned about whether they were drawn into a district with someone else, which I think has happened to a few of our House members. And I think a lot of them are going to make sure that they were drawn into a district that they are familiar with. So there are a lot of people checking that out very quickly and making sure that they're either in the district, and hopefully they're in the district by themselves. But really the most egregious concerns are the things that we've already talked a little bit about, and that is whether or not we're splitting up voting communities unnecessarily. Are we diluting the power of the vote for certain groups of people so that they cannot be influencers? And the maps came out so late yesterday, as we've already mentioned, that there's still evaluation going on in some of those districts of whether those maps are doing those kinds of things. Are they splitting up communities of interest? Are we unnecessarily splitting up counties or communities? Are we putting a lot of the say certain groups in, packing them or stacking them, and what happens with that is it creates probably creates an avenue for a legal challenge, but the main thing that it does is creates an avenue for people to think it's grossly unfair, and we don't need that. And because this came out late, and whether or not we're going to have a full discussion and some amendments and changes made to it is yet to be seen. But if we don't have a fair and transparent process with opportunity for feedback and input, that's going to create an opportunity for people to feel that the maps are not fair. And if that happens, then they feel the elections are not fair. And we really need to work hard to make sure that there is an opportunity for input, and there is an opportunity for guiding these maps along to be as fair as possible.
Thank you so much. Now, Representative Hugley, the Republican press release specifically mentioned the creation of new minority opportunity districts, but at the same time, they also paired minority incumbent legislators with other, sometimes minority legislators, and with other incumbent legislators. So what are your thoughts about that?
Melita, I think that's one of the most egregious things about the map, the pairings that you just mentioned, because they are unnecessary pairings, particularly when you look at Gwinnett County. Gwinnett County had the greatest increase in population. So why would you, in heaven's name, have a pairing coming out of Gwinnett County? Certainly it was not because of a lack of population there. And those districts were pretty much overpopulated as the numbers came out from the census. So that shows you that things are being deliberately done that have nothing to do with redistricting principles, because if you were following those principles, you would not do that. The other thing that concerns me about the map, when you look at Forsyth County and you look at Athens, places like that, those communities are being split in so many different directions. And is that done because that is the interest of those communities? Is that what those communities are asking for? Those are red flags in my mind that we need to have questions about and need to be concerned about, because at the end of the day, the districts belong to the citizens of this state. What we do and how we do it should reflect the interests and concerns of those citizens. Most counties do not want to be split 4 or 5 different ways unnecessarily. So we need to take a look at those things, and we need to continue to talk about it. And as we work through this process, we're going to be fighting for transparency and fair maps. And that's going to be our goal throughout this entire redistricting session. And we invite you and everyone else that's concerned about what's going to happen in Georgia over the course of the next 10 years to join us in that fight for transparency, openness, and fair maps.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned county splitting, and in the press release, it mentioned a reduction in the number of counties split from 73 down to 68. Representative Buckner, this still seems like an excessive number in a state where many counties have populations smaller than the required size for a House district. Your thoughts?
Yes, that is a unique number to be out there. And one of the things that's already been mentioned is Athens Clarke County. They have 3 representatives now, and with this map, they'll go to 4. Over and over in the town hall meetings, we heard testimony about basically 3 things: that they wanted fewer splits in their communities, where they would have like 1 representative for the whole county if their population would allow for that. And they also wanted to have transparency in the process. And so those were the messages I took away from the town hall meetings that I attended. And I think we still need to carry that flag, if you will, and make sure that people know that we heard what they said. They want to have 1 representative for their whole community, not to be split between multiple communities.
Thank you so much. Senator Anderson, let's now turn to the Republican proposal for a Senate map. How do you react to the way that map is drawn?
Wow and wow. Especially Senator Parent mentioned Senate District 117. Senate District 17. There's no 117. Senate District 17 is very surprising. And we know that, as Senator Parent mentioned, it is to save a white male for however many years to come. But that was a super huge wow, as that district borders my district. And so just surprised and appalled, I guess, but I shouldn't be. As I said earlier, I was warned by these wonderful women on this panel with me that it would come to this.
Okay, now Senator Parent, I want to get your thoughts. And I want to also ask you about the district for Senator Albers, where we had a wonderful woman who ran, Sarah Beeson. They specifically split Sarah's subdivision and drew her out of the district, which tells me they didn't want her to run against Albers again. So can you give us your thoughts and maybe even compare the differences between the Republican Senate map and the Democratic Senate map?
Well, now that you're speaking of it, one big difference is that the Democratic proposal for the Senate districts received an A from the nonpartisan nonprofit Princeton Gerrymandering Project, and the Republican proposal has received an F. So that tells you that ours really followed traditional redistricting principles much better. And as you were pointing out, Melita, with Senate District 56, as Senator Anderson was pointing out about 17, we can look at this map for the Senate and we see exactly why things are the way they are. And none of them are following what the communities want, what the communities have asked for, or traditional redistricting principles. There are things like, all right, Bruce Thompson in 14 is running for labor commissioner. So he's not running for re-election. So we'll use his district to do this. And this is a number of things. Shoring up the 56, the Albers district, having the population to move 56 out of where it makes sense and kind of North Fulton over to the west and north to try to save him, and specifically draw out the strong woman, fantastic candidate, Sarah Beeson, who ran against him last time. Other uses of that population from 14 are to all of the Northwestern Republican districts were underpopulated. We see, you know, Tyler Harper running for ag commissioner, his district's gone. We see, you know, 17, we want to save 17 as a Republican seat, and we want to save Senator Strickland. So it's all about stuff like that. Who's running, who's not running. And that's then what gets reflected in the map versus what the communities deserve and have asked for across the state. And Representative Hugley really did an excellent job of laying out what the principles are that we should be following. Not, oh, so-and-so decided to run for higher office, so now that district's gone, you know. Of course, the ultimate goal on top of all that being saving as many Republicans as possible and creating districts to hold in the state Senate at least 29 for the majority for 10 years. So they had in their press release for the Senate map championing how they drew it based on compactness. Well, you can take a look at 46, which is the Athens area, goes all over the place. 17 now goes all over the place. Compact, these districts are not. And it's pretty easy to tell the story of exactly why they're all drawn the way they are.
Thank you so much. Now we have a viewer question. Representative Hugley, I'd like to ask you, will we expect to see Public Service Commission districts drawn out before Thanksgiving when you adjourn?
We have not been advised regarding that matter. So I don't have an answer for you. Maybe the senators know about that.
Well, I did look, I looked into this, and it's not in the call for a special session to handle the Public Service Commission districts. I looked, and 10 years ago, they were passed in February or March. So we may expect to see them just during the regular session. Of course, back then we qualified in May and April and had primaries in July. Now that's been moved up 2 months. I don't know how that might impact that process, but as of now, I agree with Representative Hugley. We don't expect that we'll be taking up Public Service Commission districts in these next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you so much. Representative Buckner, for those receptive to the message, there was much to learn from the census results and the comments from citizens during the statewide listening tour conducted as part of this redistricting process. Please share what you've learned about the lives of your fellow Georgians.
Well, I think this has been a most unique time. If anybody that says differently, I don't know exactly what they're thinking, but it is unique because this is, a lot of people say, probably the most undercounted census that we will have in many, many decades. On top of that, with the pandemic, we have seen a lot of changes in people's attitudes and concerns, and we have a unique opportunity to learn. If we know that there in Georgia has been population shift, so now's the time for us to dig a little deeper and say, why is that population shifting? We cannot continue to have everybody move to the metro area. We still need things done in the rural areas. And what is keeping them in those rural areas, or what is running them further north to the more populated areas? And a lot of it has to do with jobs. Some of it has to do with access to healthcare. We've had rural hospitals closing. We are looking at people that could work and live on a farm, but they don't have internet capabilities, or cell phone service doesn't even work well. They don't have broadband width. What we also learned to the positive during the pandemic is that a lot of people would like to take advantage of telemedicine. And in order to do that, we've got to look at the broadband issues. So as we look at the changes in population, it might be a really good time for us to stop and take stock of, why did those population moves occur? Why did the changes occur? What can we do to to make our population more universally distributed across the state, so that we can help our small towns, our rural communities, our hub cities be stronger and have a more diverse population, more equally distributed across the state. It's never going to be the same in rural and metro, but it could be that we could address some of these concerns and make the distribution a little different. It has been, so it could be again.
Thank you so much. Now, Senator Anderson, there are several terms that get bandied about that not everybody understands. Stacking, packing, cracking. Can you please explain these terms as related to the redistricting process, so that as the media accounts use these terms, people will know what they're talking about?
So that is a great question, Alita. I'm going to preface it by using the word gerrymandering. And I know people have heard that word, but partisan gerrymandering, or manipulating the boundaries, or cheating is, when it comes to redistricting, is to favor one party or class over another. So what it does is it amplifies a political party's power beyond what it deserves based on their the votes that they share. So the process of packing and cracking are quote unquote complementary. So packing occurs when many supporters of a minority party are jammed into a small number of districts, giving them a few overwhelming wins. The remaining members of the minority party are then cracked or spread out to a larger number of districts, so that there is consistently, so their voices are diluted. Packing and cracking creates a distinctive pattern of wins for both minority and majority, where the minority party wins a few seats by overwhelming margins, the majority party wins considerably by lower margins. One of the other things that happens with cracking and packing and gerrymandering is something that I learned while the Black Caucus was out in the community educating our constituents. And one of them was called prison mandering. And that happens when, as Representative Buckner said, the count has been the lowest ever. But prison mandering happens when incarcerated persons are counted where they're incarcerated and not counted where they are from. So their voices are automatically diluted. And so cracking and packing happens for one party to have the upper hand over the other. So there's cheating and all those wonderful bad things, not wonderful things, all those bad things happen to good people because of it.
Thank you so much. We have a viewer submitted question that I want to pose to all of you. And as you answer this question, please give any closing thoughts as we end the program. And we'll start with Senator Parent. The question was submitted by Lynn Snyder. She says, with so many egregious anti-voting and anti-women laws being passed in states across the country and gridlock in Washington, what words of wisdom do you have for exhausted activists?
Yeah, that is, I think we're all feeling a little bit that way after last night being tough. Look, I think that the reality of being a Democrat is we have a very broad and large coalition, and that's our strength, but it also means that there's even more division and differences within members of the Democratic caucuses, and that's evident right now in Washington, right? Than on the Republican side, although they still totally have their challenges. I mean, look, I think we all have to look back and reflect on all of the successes. Being in politics is sort of in knowing that there are pendulum swings within politics, and that sort of pendulum swing is going to be inevitable. It is sort of like signing yourself up to take a punch to the face every so often. And every time I felt that way, and I felt that way many times over my time in politics, you know, there's always another election, there's always another opportunity. So you have to pat yourself on the back for all of the successes that we've had here in Georgia. And there have been extreme, significant successes, and there are a lot more to come. But that doesn't mean that sometimes in politics, it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, because basically that is something that is baked in to a certain extent. We are well positioned in Georgia. I can tell you that the interest from national organizations around the country is huge. They are very interested in assisting in our statewide races, in races for the state Senate and state House in a way that they were not 6 years ago. So the future is very bright. But you can see where if we don't do the work, it may be 2 steps forward, 2 steps back when we're aiming on continually moving forward. And I think we are. If you're feeling exhausted, you do deserve a little break. You can take a break, but then let's get back at it.
Thank you so much. Now, we know that Senator Anderson has to run to a committee meeting at 1, so we'll hear from her, and then we'll hear from our 2 state reps.
Thank you, Melita. That very important meeting is this joint House and Senate redistricting committee. And so I want to add to Senator Parent's comment. We can be tired, but we can't quit. The battle is ahead. We have people to represent. And I think that it is an assault and an attack on women because of our strength, because of our tenacity, because of the fact that we don't easily wobble over, weeble or wobble. We don't easily do that. And so the punches keep coming, but because we have the strength, as I said, we have to understand that the service is to our constituents. And I'll say this, don't quit, don't give up, because we need you as much as you need us. We need your strength. We need your wisdom. We need your support as much as you need ours. So, you know, we can how we used to do in track and field, we'll pass the baton and let that person rest. But we just keep the relay. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon, and it may take us some time, but we'll get there. So thank you for all that you do and for the support that you give us. We need you as much as you need us. So
thank you.
Break, but don't quit.
Thank you so much. Representative Buckner, let's pass the baton to you.
Thank you. I saw that question from Lynn in the chat, and it kind of pierced my heart, because as the mother of a young woman that cares about a lot of the women's issues that are in the news today, we have conversations quite often about this, and I can understand you're being exhausted and disappointed and frustrated. But there's one thing that I have held on to up here, because we've had some times of frustration and disappointment on the House floor. And I think Representative Hugley can agree to that. But what keeps going through my mind is the very first year I was elected, I was upset over something that passed and just thought it was so wrong. And a longtime serving person turned to me and said, nothing's really ever over up here. You can always repeal it later. So we do have that sense of opportunity always hanging out there. And I agree with what the senators have said so eloquently. Take a rest, get a new perspective maybe, and some more energy, but just know whatever's passed can be repealed, and we can, once we have the power, we can fix it.
Thank you. We're working to get women the power in the General Assembly. And we love that your young daughter, Olivia, is the youngest member of our Georgia Win List board. Let's let Representative Hugley, as the senior in service, most person on our panel, close us out.
Well, thank you, Melita, and thanks to everyone that are with us today. And thank you for the question. What I would say is that we need to understand that we are planting seeds for the future. And we're not always going to win every race and every challenge that we encounter. But when you find that you have reached the end of your rope, I suggest that you tie a knot in that rope and hold on. Hold on because the future is coming. Hold on because little girls are depending on us to do the work today so that they can reap the benefits tomorrow. So we need each other. If you need to take a break and look at what you've really done, what you have accomplished, but always keep an eye on the future. So tie a knot in your rope, hold on.
Thank you for those inspiring words. We appreciate all 4 of our busy panelists who took the time to join us today on the first day of this special session. We wish them well during the remainder of the special session and hope it will conclude with plenty of time for them to join their families for Thanksgiving. We also appreciate our audience of very loyal listeners. Speaking of Thanksgiving, mark your calendars for our next webinar on Wednesday, November 17th, the week before Thanksgiving. We're having this program because during Thanksgiving festivities, many of us find ourselves in rooms with and around tables beside friends and family members who have very different political views and practice very different COVID safety protocols. Our November 17 panelists will tackle the topic, lies, damn lies, and deadly deceptions, talking across the political divide. It's a discussion you will not want to miss because our panelists include a priest, 2 PR professionals, and a trained family therapist. They are Senate District 9, Reverend Senator Kim Jackson, an Episcopal priest whose ministry is to Atlanta's homeless community. HD Rep 107, Shelley Hutchinson, a psychologist by training who serves as founder and CEO of the Social Empowerment Center. Lisa Campbell, a founder and partner of Brand Fit Consulting and a former Win-List endorsed candidate for Cobb County's HD 35. And Elizabeth Toledo, who now divides her time between Atlanta and New York while serving as president of Camino Public Relations. She is a former vice president of communications for Planned Parenthood America. Georgia Win-List depends upon the generous support of our donor network to continue our important work to change the face of power by electing more women to legislative seats and statewide office. Please consider joining the powerful network of leaders who have helped turn Georgia blue. Contributions to our annual fund giving circles support this program and the training, recruitment, and election of women like the 45 Win-List endorsed women who currently serve. It'll be 46 once we get Edna Jackson sworn in. We appreciate gifts at all levels, and we're very excited about the candidates who've already shown their interest in statewide office and open legislative seats for the next cycle. Some of our winning women who are running for statewide office are already setting fundraising records for the seats they seek. Please support our work to finish the job of turning Georgia blue in 2022. Georgia's political landscape can and will shift to a deeper shade of blue with your generous support. Please also help us build an audience for Women in the News by sharing today's program with a friend or two who will enjoy watching and joining our network. Programs are archived on our Facebook page, website, and YouTube channel. Stay informed about the exciting work of our winning women by following Georgia Win-List across all your social media platforms for a perspective you may not see elsewhere. Thank you for joining us today. Stay safe and continue to wear your masks.